So private marketplaces, PMPs. A good place to start would be just Al, from Gawker's perspective,
Sure.
kind of how are you using private marketplaces these days, and kind of what are the pluses and the minuses from a publisher point of view?
Sure. So our approach to programmatic is that it's another way for our advertisers to speak to our audience. Private marketplace, from our perspective, is the way to maintain the premium quality of our inventory. You know, sellers, people go to market and call themselves premium publishers. I think you have to determine what exactly that means. For us, it's the emphasis on private marketplace. We're like 80-20 PMP to open exchange, which I think is pretty much the opposite for the industry in general. I wouldn't speak about any other publishers. But it's about having the one-to-one relationship. It's about understanding that advertising isn't just about scale and numbers and data, which are, all those things are relevant, but it's also about understanding who your clients are, what their KPIs are, and how every brand is different, and how we can personalize those ad experiences to reach our audience.
Yeah. Do you think some publishers, I think, have a bad experience, at least if they're just getting started with PMPs? You're kind of seeing kind of less ROI than they're expecting. Are there reasons for that?
PMP is a pain in the ass. At first. That's that like dramatic. At first, it's a pain in the ass because you expect it to be as easy as the open exchange. Theoretically, the open exchange, you sit down, you turn it on, you push some levers, you get your ad ops guy to do it, and revenue starts. And you're like, oh, this is awesome. We should like scale up and do a more concerted effort and have sellers devoted to this in a private marketplace setting. The problem is private marketplace is much more nuanced. It's a much more bespoke experience for the publisher and for the client. So it takes time to understand what the kinks are in the system, what your value proposition actually is as it relates to private marketplace, because it's not enough to be a publisher and say, hey, we have this, so you should buy it. You know, you have to actually have a reason why this is a more effective way for you to execute your branding campaign or your DR campaign, as opposed to direct, or in partnership with direct, or in partnership with open exchange. There has to be something that they actually need private marketplace for. And if it's just a way to get higher CPMs and like say that you're a part of the space, then it's not going to work out for you.
Yeah, no, I think, so everybody has on their table a copy of the IAB's private marketplace checklist that we published earlier this year, and I think if we were writing an executive summary of it, private marketplaces are a pain in the ass, ... at first, might be a good summary, because there's a lot of things that you have to check off to do a private marketplace successfully.
Great water.
Kathy, from your perspective, kind of what's the role private marketplaces play for a buyer of media? Kind of how do they factor into the other ways that you're buying today?
Yeah, so we look for, I mean, Ayal kind of touched on this, something that's different than what we're getting in the open marketplace. They're a lot of work, it's a ton of work to have the conversations, set them up, maintain them, optimize them. And so what we look for are, one, differentiated sources of access, something we couldn't get in the open marketplace because the publisher is reserving it. That could include inventory. It could also include data. So if a publisher is overlaying their data on top of a deal, that's pretty valuable and that's very interesting for us to try. And often, right now, the best way for us to do that is through private deals. And then the third and obvious one is that if we're getting some kind of a rate relief because of a promise of volume, then we engage in private deals. I wish that private deals would also be able to always provide more volume. That tends to be the more unpredictable one. If we ask a publisher to put more volume through a particular deal, sometimes they can increase the priority of it, but if the rate doesn't go up accordingly, then perhaps we lose often. We have a lot of data overlay on our side to make sure that it's still bringing the promise of programmatic, being addressable and very audience targeted. Yeah. And so our fill might be lower than they expected, so that becomes a challenge.
Right. When you talk to a media company about a PMP deal, like what kind of overhead is involved for you, and just how many of them can you manage to juggle at one time?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, for advertisers, it will depend on the kind of systems they have in place and the types and length of campaigns they are running. So for us, we took an old CRM, an existing CRM tool, and we kind of repurposed it for publisher information housing. So we have publishers fill out a survey about all of their programmatic offering, private and open. Do they have data? What exchanges do they use? All of that stuff. And when they fill out that survey, it goes into our CRM tool. And so every programmatic buyer at Netflix, which is growing, now there are about 30 of us on the team, they can go into that CRM tool and they can see everything they need to know about that publisher. And then when we create a deal, we put all that information in there too, associate it to the publisher, so we can manage just that information at a high scale. There are thousands of publishers now in there. And so that has worked well for us, and it's certainly much easier than spreadsheets. I heard that at a separate discussion, someone mentioned that's how they were managing their private deals, and that really, I mean, that has a very natural limit to it.
No, for
So
sure.
the CRM tool helps. And then the other consideration I mentioned is this type and scope of a campaign. Someone like a CPG company that has a broad target and a long runway can probably incrementally add and manage many deals live for a long time. Whereas for us, it's more difficult because we are now moving toward very specific title campaigns that have a very specific audience, and the runway is shorter. It's 6 to 8 weeks for most campaigns. So in the time it takes to plan, set up, execute, and finish, these deals have to work flawlessly or they never get off the ground.
Yeah.
Not to mention analyzing the data afterwards.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so talk about how that plays in. I mean, do you do like PMP deals on like a trial basis and look at the campaign results and then you'll maybe like go, okay, we'll not do another one of those with you, or hey, that was amazing, I can't wait to do another?
Yeah, so there are obvious partners for us. They're entertainment focused, and they have the kind of audience that we're looking for. Maybe they're a subscription-based provider, whatever. For some of those top 10 to 20 per region, we have ongoing discussions. And it might be a campaign-specific deal if they're overlaying audience data. It might be an evergreen deal. We sort of optimize over time by campaign. But we try and, for our managers, make just a few campaigns that they need to focus on so they can focus with the depth it takes to do these true real-time optimizations. I mean, almost real-time. Look at the data that's coming in and say, this isn't as viewable as I expected, it's not as engaging as I expected, something here is off. I think it's difficult to say that something doesn't work after one campaign because, again, for us, each campaign is so different. We have very different titles. Narcos is different than BoJack is different than House of Cards. And if the audience and the creative that we targeted on top of that deal just wasn't a hit, then that deal will look like it's not performing well, and that's as much on us as anybody. So we would try again.
Right. I don't think it's ever the brand's fault if something goes wrong in a campaign.
Never us. No, it's us sometimes.
Eyal, one of the reasons for publishers to be excited about PMPs is kind of a sense of getting control back, kind of having more of a say over pricing or who gets to bid on inventory. Is that real, or is it an illusion, or is it something that publishers need to like outgrow, get over that preconceived notion?
No, I think the opposite. I think they need to embrace the idea of control. I can only speak about Gawker Media in the way that we've developed from a programmatic perspective, but when we started programmatic, it was PMP only. As things have developed, the sophistication of the marketplace, we've been able to discuss or A/B test or think about the open exchange, but it still needs to develop from a sophistication perspective so that we can protect our readers from nefarious advertising, and publishers need to own their space because ultimately all of us in the room are concerned mostly with the consumer. And if the consumer doesn't like your ads, if they're slow to load, if it's like cash for gold or weight loss, here's your horoscope, either they're not going to come back to your site or they're going to use ad blocker, in which case you lose either way. Publishers are just as likely to control their inventory as buyers are to control their creative. It's a decision that has to be made that this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to move forward. We might have to sacrifice revenue in a certain, along the way to make sure that we are maintaining that premium level of inventory and quality. But that's a luxury that I personally have because Gawker Media is a private media company that doesn't have a corporate board that's telling us what we have to do. That's a luxury that I have that not every publisher enjoys. But what publishers need to do, especially the ones that have to have people to report to like that, they need to make sure that they have decided we're going to be premium and we're going to devote lots of resources and lots of bandwidth to making sure that our inventory is protected. It's as simple as whack-a-mole. You see an ad that isn't good, you call your SSP or you call whoever it is and say, get this out of here. I don't want this in my ecosystem. And you do it, if that's what it takes, that's what it takes. But we've heard a lot about ad blocking and stuff like that, but that's what it's about. It's about quality advertising on quality pages for quality users.
Makes sense. Let's talk a little bit about inventory types. Kathy, you mentioned kind of one of the things that incentivizes you to go with a PMP type solution would be something you can't get on an open exchange. Is that true of some inventory types? Are there, whether it's video or other sorts of like super premium inventory, is that something better suited to PMPs or reserved for PMPs?
Yeah, I mean, it's changed over time. Before it was access to just publishers. Like Gawker wasn't available in the open marketplace. So that was the only way, regardless of format, to be on, say, Gawker programmatically. More recently, then it was rising star units or really large format, the stuff that people usually still want to pay a premium for, 970 by 250, 300 by 600, all of that. So we've done a lot of deals to get access to that inventory or access to more of it. But video, definitely. I mean, it's expensive to make video content, and so it's in high demand. So it's this perfect storm, I guess, where we'd love to buy more of it, but it never ends up. The good stuff really barely ever makes it into the open marketplace. Totally. So you have to have a deal to get it.
And it's not so much about necessarily the ad size. It's about the priority, right? If a savvy buyer like Netflix, you're so savvy.
Thank you. I'll pay you later.
A savvy buyer like Netflix, who, to your credit, does a really excellent job of sharing KPIs and targeting methodologies and what you want to get out of a specific campaign, you're not going to get what you really need in the open exchange because it goes through so many iterations in a waterfall that if the most important thing to you is reaching a specific user, then you have to do private marketplace. And that's where the advent of header bidding gets interesting, because it gets interesting as long as it doesn't create latency on the pages. But it's a really effective way to make your ad server smarter and say, OK, you might not be a direct client, but you also have really high criteria for each unique user. Like somebody that does a direct deal with Gizmodo, which is one of our sites, they buy Gizmodo run-of-site inventory. They just get it as DFP gives it to them. But someone that wants a very specific user on Gizmodo should have the ability to jump ahead of them in the waterfall and grab that impression. I'm not talking about necessarily at a higher CPM. It's just being smarter about giving the inventory to the right buyers, because ultimately that's what we're all trying to do. We're trying to help brands tell their stories to the right people. And so header bidding is definitely an interesting thing, but the more crap you put on the pages, the slower it gets.
Yeah, let's actually take a step back. I was a little surprised that header bidding hasn't really come up at this event so far today. At the IB's AdOps Summit last week in New York, it was kind of like every other sentence was like header bidding this, header bidding that. I think the AdOps community is definitely wrestling with the implications of header bidding in terms of load times and whatnot. Eyal, can you just sort of give a kind of high-level overview of how it works?
I think so. I think there are people want to put JavaScript on your page and determine what user comes into your waterfall and give specific buyers a first look at that inventory before anybody else sees it. Is that more or less, it's okay?
I think that's fair.
The problem is with header bidding, everybody wants it, right? Like every vendor, every SSP, every data partner says, we can give you the best header bidding integration, which is why there's interesting stuff out there right now with open source header bidding, where you have a header, one person doing header bidding that you can put all of your demand sources into. So that literally you're actually creating a real auction. I'm not talking about AdX is here and Rubicon is here and everything's all scattered. You put it all together so people are actually competing for the right to own an impression. And it's intriguing. It's something that we like to take our time with these things. We don't like to be impulsive and just act quickly for, it's Q4, what am I going to do? So it's going to take time, but it's something that we're investigating. But again, the underlying principle behind all the things that people are talking about is latency on the pages and user experience. And one of the problems with programmatic summits in general is that there isn't a lot of discussion about creative. I know that we've talked about it a little bit today, but ultimately the right creative will deliver on whatever KPI you have. And so that needs to be something that's always part of the conversation.
Yeah, no, that's great. And then just kind of wrapping up header bidding, so you already kind of said that the reason it's disruptive is there's a kind of nice orderly progression of like, I'm going to direct sell this inventory, and if I can't sell it directly, then I might put it into a PMP, and if I can't sell it via the PMP, then maybe it goes to an open exchange. That's sort of what gets called the waterfall a lot, right? And header bidding is disruptive because it kind of throws that out the window, because the inventory can suddenly become available kind of to anybody, kind of
anybody that you allow into the ecosystem, right? You still have to maintain those controls, and so our approach to open exchange, for instance, is like a very it's not about what are the right pricings and what sites and how transparent should be. It should be who do we want to be allowed into the ecosystem. It's not necessarily how do we set ourselves up for success. It's how do we make sure that we don't expose our readers to the wrong inventory. But header bidding, it's the same thing. It's about having quality advertisers in your ecosystem that can access your inventory the way that they can best, for them to maximize their brand message.
Yeah.
Right? So.
Kathy, what's your point of view on header bidding at this point? Is it liberating and going to open new possibilities? Is it just another technology headache to be evaluated? How do you think about it?
I think it's going to be wildly helpful for advertisers. I mean, if it includes direct opportunities as well as, I've heard some publishers say that they would test header bidding, but in a limited fashion. You know, it would only include some of their programmatic opportunity, but first and foremost, direct will always go. But if it's truly all things digital and it's truly equal opportunity bidding, that takes away a lot of friction in what we try to do. A lot of these private deals we make specifically to get bigger and better priority and access than we could get in the open marketplace. And if header bidding allows for that, we can continue our same, whitelisting, best practices for bidding. We can do all of our best practices in open marketplace and extend our reach and the kind of quality we're getting. Private deals, we've said time and again, are very difficult to maintain. They're a lot of work, and header bidding would take away a lot of need for them. I think there would still be need to get some special pricing, some rate relief. If that kind of special deal making still happened, they would play a role, but I think header bidding could solve a lot of headaches.
Yeah, that's interesting. I want to come back to the idea of the future of PMPs, or if they even have a future. One more thing around.
It's my life, man.
one more thing around ad formats and kind of what kinds of formats work well. What about I don't want to use the word, so in-feed, customized, adapted for the content sorts of ad experiences. Are PMPs making native easier? Are they having any impact on the way native ads get transacted yet?
Not for us, honestly. Not for us yet.
Yeah, I'm still struggling with the native and programmatic thing together. I know that there's a lot of people here who do it, and awesome. I'm still struggling I'm still struggling with it because personalization and scale, those things are very difficult to do, and so it's something. I do just want to say quickly about header bidding that one thing I am really interested in is header bidding so long as it never burdens or jeopardizes direct campaigns. Like, I don't know enough about the technology to know if that's something that can be done where header bidding exists until the ad server determines that we need to keep this inventory for direct campaigns, then it stops. Like, again, like I said, the investigation continues, but like Kathy said, it would be interesting to equate programmatic and direct, but obviously direct must always be protected and never cannibalized. So that's more to come.
Yeah, cool. So one of the things that came up in one of the track sessions earlier was the idea of seasonality, and maybe PMPs are kind of more important sometimes a year when demand is highest. You maybe have the most incentive to work through a PMP. Is that something either of you are seeing, or is it kind of something that it just sort of always works?
Yeah, it's certainly because they grant additional a higher place in a priority waterfall, and because there is more demand and high volume season, especially Q4 for everybody, then yes, PMPs do give a little bit more access and have some additional value in Q4 or other high periods. But I think they can be valuable throughout the year depending on the kind of publisher you're working with, the format you're asking for, and how niche you're getting.
Yeah,
I'm definitely seeing a trend of buying institutions, be they agencies or trading desks or client direct, having a new interest in creating evergreen deals so that, obviously bandwidth is a critical concern for the buy side from a PMP perspective, but they set up evergreen deals and they do what they want. I can do as much as I can to monitor each PMP activity, but Q4 is going to be the highest volume, but it's also potentially going to be the lowest volume because direct sales are so successful in Q4, right? So that's a concern. From a programmatic perspective, but not from a holistic perspective as a representative of Gawker Media. We want to do whatever is best for the company and for the readers and for our advertisers. And if it ends up being that sell-through rates on the direct side are so high that I don't have a lot of inventory to sell on programmatic, so be it. But that's the way it is, which is why header bidding is so interesting.
Right. Right. So let's start talking about the future. I think one of the things that as I've been learning about PMPs I found interesting is this kind of this argument that says that PMPs are actually kind of bad from the perspective of open exchanges because they absorb a lot of demand. And so demand that would have otherwise gone to an open exchange and raised prices on the open exchange gets absorbed through PMPs. Therefore, inventory that you kind of sell through real-time bidding or any other open exchange doesn't do as well.
Yeah, but the floors are so low on the open exchange. If you want to be competitive, if you want to like get any fill in the open exchange, you really have to cannibalize what your projected eCPM or RCPM are going to be. In the PMP landscape, it's not just about price gouging, but it's also about creating a healthy environment for everyone to come in and be able to compete. It's not like a victory to set up a PMP. Like I don't like get handshakes. Like you set one up, congratulations. You celebrate when you scale one and the client is happy. But if a client is like really tough about pricing and they say, no, I want my floor to be $4, I said, okay, fine, but everybody's clearing at $7. So the pricing is on the publisher to determine what's the best way to set things up. But if the open exchange is upset because supply is getting sucked up by private marketplace, so be it. I mean,
you're doing okay anyway.
The open exchange is not.
You're still doing business.
I don't have people calling me like I'm not getting enough inventory in the open exchange. They don't know who I am. They don't know that their creative is on my page more often than not. You know, one of the ironies is like when you talk to brands and they're like, "You're not the right fit," or like we have concerns about brand safety, stuff like that. But like, there's how much money are they spending in the open exchange, having no idea where the creative is going, right? So, as far as I'm concerned, I don't care what the open exchange thinks.
Yeah. Is brand safety something that...
Why is everybody laughing?
Is brand safety something that kind of encourages Netflix to go more PMP deals as opposed to open exchanges? I mean...
No. Mm-hmm. No. So when we're buying in the open exchange, we do most of it with white lists. That could be a whole nother panel of how we actually can do that effectively, and there are certainly gaps in our quality there. But by and large, most of the sites on our whitelist we're totally confident in. They're totally happy. We have, we have filters on top for digital quality, what they're talking about, context. So brand safety is much less of a concern. For me, I'd say I care very much about what's in the open exchange, again, because of this frictionless buying that it enables. We can't set up and maintain more than like 10 deals per campaign usually. And have them scale and have them do well and give them the attention they deserve. So there are publisher partners with whom we would love to do more business, but we really cannot say, of the 10 that we can choose, some of these publishers honestly cannot be one of them. And that's not to say we shouldn't do business, send it into the open marketplace, but if they won't, then we just can't work together.
Something that I play with, like what would I do in the future, would be to set up a private marketplace in the open exchange. Does that make sense? Think about it. I mean, you can have as much transparency as you want in the open exchange, right? You can have, I'm blind, and buyers go, we don't buy any blind publishers. I can say, I'm semi-transparent. I'm only Gawker Media, you don't know what of the 8 sites. Or I could say, this is Jezebel, and this is Deadspin, and this is on and on. But Kathy's right. It's easier to buy in the open exchange. It would solve a lot of headaches for the buy side if they were able to just do everything in the open exchange. But they don't have the level of granularity that they like, right? And I'm still scared of the open exchange if I want to offer my data or big sizes, like 970 by 250 right under the logo of one of our blogs. That's real estate that's like of concern to us, and we want to make sure that only, like I said, quality advertising is there. But if I find out that the buy side is pining for open exchange and they're sick of the PMP UIs and all of like the reporting being all over the place, and that's something to investigate.
Yeah.
We have to react to the demands of the clients.
It would be good to see an evolution in the open marketplace where you just have better control. Whitelists that you can trust, price floors that you can feel confident in. Because we would be happy to, there are rates that we can agree to. We don't want to say, we're not going into open marketplace necessarily to get lower CPMs. We're doing it because the control and scale is there. That's where the automation really happens. But it's not for, asking for half the cost of that 970 by 250.
Sure.
Yeah. So that's all really interesting. It feels like there could be evolutionary steps that open marketplaces could take that would make them a better, more comfortable substitute for PMPs, but they're not there yet. There's enough of a divide that PMPs are still a necessary part of the ecosystem.
There's that, and the other prong of this approach could be, and should be, and is currently trying to reduce some of the friction of the private deal process. It feels very nascent. I mean, all we get is every different exchange has a different deal ID. All we get is this little token, and then everything else is just manual error. People put in the wrong floor. They have the wrong target. They don't know that these impressions are coming through not cookied, so any audience list you put on top won't function. Better that we had like some kind of directory where if I put this token into my DSP, it can reference that directory and it knows exactly what should be targeted or could be targeted and give us a flag if we do something in error, and on the publisher side too.
Yeah, yeah. Cool. So what's your advice if there's a publisher in the audience that's kind of looking to kind of start talking to potential brands or agencies about PMP style deals? Kind of what's the best way to start that conversation? What do you need to bring to the table to make your partners interested?
A value proposition. You have to have a reason for having a programmatic conversation, just like any other sale. If you don't have anything good to sell, then you're not ready to go to market. And whether that's viewability or scale or quality adjacency as it relates to content or whatever it may be.
Data or something.
Yeah, of course, data, obviously. Like any of those things are interesting things to talk about, but until you're ready to actually sit down and troubleshoot a deal idea that's not working, you're not ready. And if you go to market and you get the meeting with Kathy that you've been waiting for, and she's like, okay, let's set up a deal ID, and then it's broken and you don't know how to fix it, you screwed up. You have to be ready. You have to be ready for all those things, and you can't just have a meeting and say, we have these sites. There has to be something special about the offering, like every other sale.
Yeah. So again, it kind of comes back to the checklist. Be aware that there is this long series of steps and things that you need to do to do one of these deals successfully. They're not turnkey or automatic or magical. There's a lot of work and knowledge and learning involved. So that feels like it's good advice.
I'd agree, and I'd add expectations differ
Yes.
on both sides. So for me, a successful deal delivers against my audience and has some meaningful scale, and that what meaningful is depends on the size of the campaign anyway. Often I see publisher partners might think that success happens at 100% fill or some extremely high amount. If there's any opportunity that we passed on, they say something here is wrong, something's not working well. That's not true from my perspective. It has worked swimmingly. So being able to understand that if they're sending a multitude of impressions, we might still only buy 5% of them. And that's
Right.
how it goes.
Right. So making sure expectations are set level on both sides, kind of going in with both eyes open, understanding the complexities of PMP are kind of all things that are key to succeeding at this stage of the market.
Yeah.
I think being able to respond to clients very quickly is also important because we talk about it being real time. So clients will give you 24 hours to fix something, and then they're like, okay, well, this is private marketplace. It's non-guaranteed. I don't owe you anything. You haven't fixed my problem in 24 hours. I'm turning you off, and goodbye. They don't even have to tell you. They just turn it off. They're like, this is, no, going away. So you have to do as good a job as you can of catering to their needs in any job, but specifically in real-time bidding, you need to be prepared to do whatever's necessary to fix the problem. So that's why I say the technical sophistication has to be there for you to go to market.
Yeah, yeah. Gail from Kellogg's set up the day, I think, really well, kind of talking about an evolutionary path that Kellogg is on from programmatic 1.0, kind of learning about optimizing, kind of the right impression to programmatic 2.0, kind of right impression, right person, kind of down the road. Where, not speaking personally about Netflix or Gawker, where do you think the industry is at with PMPs right now? Are we still in a PMP 1.0 and there's something big and exciting kind of coming? Are we kind of towards maturity there? Where are we at?
Would not say we're at maturity. We're a little past 1.0 in that we don't have to define what it is, and most people can understand the general crux of how it should work. But we're not at that point where the most important questions are coming up on both sides every time. Questions of what kind of creative is being served, what's being monitored, are they cookied, what devices will this run on? Some things that will really stop and prevent full delivery don't even come up in conversation. So I'd give it a 1.1.
No, sure. And given kind of the sort of complicated database that you're building in your CRM system and the need for that, the fact that it's just not common knowledge or there's not standardized ways to convey that information.
The fact that there's so much to talk about. There's just, it's impossible for us to have a conversation and walk away and say, we remember everything that we need to know to make this successful. It has to be written down. It's this gigantic spreadsheet. Our questionnaire is probably longer than this, unfortunately. It's irritating, and I'm sorry for anyone that has filled it out, but it's so helpful because we just can't keep all that in mind.
Makes sense. Eyal, where do you think the industry
Well,
is
I
at right
think
now?
programmatic guaranteed is part of private marketplace, if you ask me, and then you have to think about programmatic guaranteed and real-time bidding because they're two different things. I think the future of private marketplace is going to go towards programmatic guaranteed as the agencies develop programmatic guaranteed as the way that they're going to just start buying all their digital media, which is not great for publishers, but it is what it is. But I think the RTB stuff, the non-guaranteed, is still going to be a critical part of every publisher's setup and every buyer's campaign. It is no longer like, should we do this? It's, we are doing it. Now let's make it as easy as possible to execute.
Great. A lot of growth to come, a lot of new things to learn, and you guys have been perfect guides to the world of PMPs. So thank you both very much.
Thanks.